What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retrospect. Today we're going to take a look at Anbernic's new 406V, the successor to last year's very popular 405V. Right now the 406V is the most performative vertical emulation handheld on the market today. Let's take a look. Right off the bat, I do understand that there is an ANEO DMG that will be more powerful than this. Like, ridiculously stupid, doesn't really make sense why it's so powerful for a vertical handheld. That being said, while I'm filming this, that has yet to ship. So right now, this is the most performative vertical handheld on the market right now. And when it comes to ANEO, who knows when it's going to get out there. Anyways, let's take a look at the 406V, do a quick unboxing here, and then we'll move right along. This is your typical Anbernic box. I got a beige white one. There is a transparent black and gray. I really wish they would have had this atomic purple that they had in the 405V, or even better, they could have had the wood grain one. I would have been totally cool with that too, but they have some pretty boring colors this time around, which is kind of sad because I think that it lost some of its hype because that's kind of how it got the hype with the colors last time. But here we go, we have the device. We'll just move this out of the way. We'll just take the whole tray. Why not? Move that out of the way for a minute. And here we do have a Type-C cable. Surprise! We actually do have a screen cover. So this one does have a screen where Anbernic is giving us a screen cover with this, which is nice to see, as well as our mini wipes. This is a big screen, and we got the same tiny little wipes they put on the 3.5-inch screen. That's kind of rude. We also have our origami accordion. Some good information on here if you are unfamiliar with Anbernic's front end on Android. If you want to learn some hotkeys and things like that, that information will be in here. Once I get these things started up, I pretty much just go away from everything Anbernic has set up on these. But, you know, if you're into it, you're into it. And then we'll get the handheld out. I do find it funny that they don't wrap the screens on these like they do on a lot of the other handhelds. She is a pretty device. It is slightly different than the 405. At first, I wasn't going to review this because I thought it was just the same thing with a different SoC inside of it, and I was kind of just, it's been sitting here, and I just decided I was like, why am I going to do this? And then I realized how much different the two of them actually are, and then I got excited. So we're going to take a look at it here today. First off, we are going to start with the I/O of the handheld like we typically do, so let's do that, and then we will get into the nuts and bolts of her. Right here on the top, we do have a C hole, that is your charging hole, as well as an LED light and ventilation for the active cooling. On the back here, we do actually have a ventilation hole as well. I believe they're going to stop using these after this handheld, but we do have ventilation for the fan inside of there, and we do have our shoulder and trigger buttons. This is the biggest difference on here that I really wanted to see. If you've been on my channel for a while, you hear me complain because I actually love the 405V, and I still use it today, but these are really sensitive triggers. These are much better on this new one. And see how they wrapped the edge on the old one? The new one, they actually have a gap there, so you're not accidentally hitting these while you're playing with it. So it took away that problem that I've been having this entire time. And that was actually what made me think maybe I should look at this. And my goodness, I wish I would have looked at it earlier. You guys would have had a video months ago. Anyways, outside of the shoulders, we do have these grips built in, as well as, I think these are supposed to be for your pinky. I've never been able to fit my pinky in them. It actually usually uses, like, my middle finger usually sits in there, but maybe it is for your middle finger now that I'm actually looking at it instead of just talking. But yeah, so it's a really comfortable, probably one of the most comfortable handhelds, especially a vertical, that I've ever used. I'm not much of a vertical handheld person, but there are a few that I like. Usually a smaller one. I usually carry a vertical for like my everyday, and then if I'm going to go a bigger one, it's got to be comfortable. And they're few and far between to find one that's comfortable in my hands, but this one here, these are especially comfortable in my hands. So on the right hand side over here, we do have our Anbernic button, which will open their front end, and our micro SD hole. On the right hand side over here, we do have volume up and down and a power button. On the bottom down here, we do have our speaker holes, as well as a 3.5 hole for all your crazy tunes. On the front here, we do have a 4-inch panel. We do have our face buttons, which have good travel. These are great little skittle buttons here from Anbernic. The reason why I actually went with white, and then I realized after I ordered it that there was skittle buttons on the gray one, and I kind of am digging the gray one of these. I kind of think I should have ordered gray, but white will match my other Anbernic handhelds of this generation, so it'll be fine. They'll all look the same, except for maybe the purple 406H. We'll see. And we do have our D-pad here. It's a good D-pad. It's an Anbernic D-pad. It seems a little stiff at first, but actually it's got really good rebound to it. It works real well, and it's not like hard to push down stiff. It just seems, in comparison to some other Anbernic D-pads out there, it feels stiffer, but it's not really. We do have a home and back button right here. We also have our start and select down here, and then we have these beautiful joysticks right here. We have some hall sensing joysticks. They are switch style with some tiny little nubs on them. They're like little nipples. on here, and you just play with them. They feel very, very good. These are actually, I believe, the ones off the Retroid and AYN. If you pull the caps off, they actually look exactly the same underneath here, and those are the only other ones I've seen that use these. Oh, actually, that's not true. The XU Mini M actually uses these joysticks as well. Maybe that's fine. Maybe everybody's gonna start using them, and if that's good, I would love for the entire industry to switch to the same joysticks. It'd give me less to complain about, but that's okay. I'd have more fun gaming. And that's it as far as a walkthrough on here. We'll go through the specs here real quick, and then we will get going. The Anbernic 406V is running Android 13. It does have that 4-inch screen like I talked about. That is 960 by 720. The SoC on here is a Unisoc T820, which you can find on the Cube and the RG556, and now the RG406H, as well as the Anbernic 406V. It is using that Mali G57 GPU still. It has 8 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM. Obviously, we have our Hall joysticks. These do have RG bezel on them, like everything else. Now, you can see the difference in last year's makes, where they didn't have the RGB, and this year where they have RGB on everything. It does have 128 gigs of internal storage, and then obviously that micro SD card. It is using a 5500 milliamp battery, which is supposed to give you up to about 8 hours. That really depends on how heavy the gaming you're doing, because in Android gaming, you can kill a battery pretty quick if you're doing some heavy loads, but it does take 3.5 hours to charge. Those dual speakers, like I said, the holes are for them right down here at the bottom. Bottom is better than back, but I would still rather have the speakers on the front. Though the way you cup your hands on this handheld does that cool cupping effect where the speakers almost go into your face on accident. So I think they probably thought that through, and it works just fine. This does do HDMI out like the other T820s via USB-C display. Has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 5.0, gyro, and a vibration motor, which is weak sauce. The vibration motor in this thing is really, really bad. It reminds me, you know what? It's actually probably less powerful than the pager I had in high school. But I did take some gameplay requests for this handheld, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to save those for my deeper dive video. Just going to play a couple of things here real quick. I don't want to do a ton of gameplay in this. I just kind of want to introduce it to the world and maybe point out a couple of differences between this here and the 405V, which don't look that different on the start, but somehow the 406V is even more comfortable than the 405V was. I was kind of like, did we need this handheld? And honestly, we kind of did. So I love the 405V, don't get me wrong, and I didn't think you were going to make it more comfortable, but they did, and it's in some subtle ways that you don't really notice when you look at them, even side by side. They do look pretty much the same, and everything is in the same positions on these. Oops, sorry, wrong way. Everything that they have on here is in the same spots, so they really pretty much could have used the same shells if they wanted to. There are these differences, like I pointed out before. There is a gap now that was not present on the 405V from the edge to where your buttons are. And at the first I thought maybe they just made smaller buttons, but nope, the ledge is smaller in between there, so you can tell that as well. So there are some subtle differences. There's a little bit difference in angle cuts on here. I believe the front here is more rounded. This feels pretty square. It just kind of has a single curve on here, where if I don't know if you can see it on camera, you kind of need the shadowing to make it happen, but you can, yeah, so maybe we can see it here. So there actually is some rounding off this flat surface here, where it kind of goes down in steps, right? You don't get that. It's kind of hard to tell with purple, but it's not to that extent here on the 405V. Our button membranes are, I think this one's a little looser. I think the 405, with as much as I've used it, it should be looser, but this is coming out looser right now. The D-pads are relatively close, but this one here is actually a little bit stiffer, and that could be from use, but it does seem like it's a little bit taller as well. And obviously these joysticks are the belle of the ball here, and you could just do a joystick swap, I suppose, but that's not what they did here, and I'm glad that they did it the way they did. These had such little travel for no reason. You could have given these a little bit more travel, make it higher, where these don't have a problem with that. These have full travel. Now, I guess the biggest problem, with this one, with the new 406, is it makes it less pocketable, where the 405 was very pocketable because everything was kind of more flush to the device. Here you're going to get the joystick stuck in your pocket itself. Now, I have found that this isn't really an extremely pocketable device to begin with. I do put it in my pocket pretty often, actually, or the 405 I did, but that's because I wear sweatpants every day, and I could even just put it in my little koala pouch on my hoodie, where this one here is going to be a little bit more challenging with that because of these joysticks being taller. I think it's still going to work. As far as that kangaroo pocket goes, I'm not sure about actually putting it in my sweatpants pockets yet, though we will find that out going down the road. I really wish they would have come out with this atomic purple again, or one of their new purples. That would have been freaking sweet. Of course, they did on the next handheld. I almost ordered the black, but this really just, it matches my other handhelds from Anbernic this year, so I figured might as well just keep with it, and I might just screw it up here on the 406H. We'll find out. Now, those few cosmetic differences aside, the 405V actually plays PSP and GameCube relatively well. You are mostly limited by the emulator itself, but it struggles to do some of the higher end emulation on PS2 and GameCube especially. You're not going to see that here in the 406V. This actually does it much better, more efficiently. You do get better battery life because of that as well. It uses a lot less energy to get there. In fact, there's areas on here where you can game on the 406V, and in the previous model, you had to have it on high power. On the 406V, you don't need to do that that at all. In Anbernic, they do have this cool little power thing that they use. Suppose I need to turn it on. So when you want to play higher end games, you can literally just accelerate your CPU right here. You have your auto mode or you have high mode, and that's it. You don't need to dick around with a whole bunch of other settings. You're either auto or high. I keep my fan on auto. Pretty quiet. I don't ever really hear it, so it doesn't bother me at all. I don't think it's going to bother anybody. If it doesn't bother me, it probably won't bother you either. Pretty sensitive to the fans, and this one here doesn't make a lot of noise. If you're thinking about making the step up, you are going to see some major differences between the two. Again, where it comes to not needing to use that higher performance mode and getting longer battery life because of that. Also, just in general, you can emulate much harder to emulate games on this handheld than you were able to on the 405V, but do you need to be able to do that? I'm not sure. That's really up to you, and if that's important. If you have the 405V and you're completely happy with everything that it's doing, and you're not looking for any more, you're just thinking, should I upgrade? I would say no. If you're just trying to get that little bit more out of it, then the 406V might be your pal. I've seen that a lot too now in Switch emulation. Now, don't buy these to emulate Switch on them, but you definitely can do lower end titles, including indies on here, and it plays just fine. I'll show you a game or two on Switch here as I do showcase. So you do have the ability to play more Switch titles on here than you did on the 405V. I wouldn't say buy either of these for Switch, partly due to the limitation of the emulators themselves. Also, Unisoc doesn't have drivers out there for running Switch emulation right now, like you'd get with the Snapdragon processors. So you're kind of limited by what you have. You're not going to make it any better. And especially now the emulators are not being worked on anymore. Without driver support, you're not going to get any better until another emulator comes out. So I'm going to emulate a couple games here for you, and then we will double back on the back end. Also part of this, I couldn't decide what front end I wanted to use, so I actually set up multiple front ends. So I've got Jujitsu set up on here, I've got Emulation Station, I've got this new console launcher set up on here, which is actually really cool. I don't think it's quite ready for mainline yet, but console launcher is really neat. And then I've got Beacon on here, and they all have their pros and cons. Fortunately, I actually took the card out of my RG4, so I can use my Emulation Station front end setup that I had on my RG4 because I'm using the same memory card. So I started to set the other ones up, and I just kind of gave up and decided, well, why don't I just use my setup from my memory card that's already on my memory card. It made total sense to me. This is the first time I've actually tried to swap that front end over to another handheld, and it just, everything is there. All my game stuff is here, all my images are here, everything that was on my cube is here, so I can swap this card back and forth. Totally makes sense to do it that way to me. But we'll do a little emulation here quick. I'm not going to emulate a ton today. This is just going to be kind of to get the device out here so that we can dig into it further in the future. Like I said, I do have some games. I made a list of games that people had left on my community post. If you have any other games you want me to try emulating, put them on that community post. We had a family Thanksgiving this weekend, so I have not had a chance to go download the specific games to do this. Otherwise, I would be doing that today, but I will do them on my follow-up video to this. So please feel free, if you want to add any games and you haven't already, please go onto my community post and add them. If I have the games already, I will play them for you. I have a pretty extensive library I've built over the last how many ever years I've been alive, and I've been collecting games, so I've got a pretty good library. Odds are pretty good. I probably have the games you're looking for, but if I do have it, I will play it for you. I'll be honest, the RG406 is not perfect. In fact, it's probably far from perfect. For one, it's just so damn big in your hands. But at the same time, the reason why it feels so good in your hands is because of the size of the handheld. You don't feel like you're squished at all, and it's comfortable. I mean, it literally has ergonomic grips on a vertical handheld, which I think is pretty freaking amazing. But it is also annoying when you want to put it in your pocket. And these new sticks, they are the cream of the crop. Like, literally, these should be the industry standard. That said, they also make this device non-pocketable. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to travel with this device at all. The 406 will come with me when I go out of the house. It's just going to go into my EDC bag, where I'm going to keep something like the Trim UI brick in my pocket. So that is going to get a lot more play than this probably will while I'm doing things. But when I have time and downtime, I really do like this handheld. You can do game streaming on it. You can play just about anything you want on it. It really is powerful, or even more powerful than it probably should be for the SoC that's inside of here. It's very impressive. And there is a significant difference between this and last year's 405. I wouldn't say, again, that it's significant enough to make that jump unless you really need that extra power for some PlayStation games maybe you can't play on your 405, for your PS2 games, maybe some GameCube games you're unable to play on there that you want to give it a shot. That might be the opportunity to go to the 406. And if you want to do some more powerful Switch emulation, the 406 is going to be better. But again, I wouldn't buy either of these for Switch emulation, because Switch emulation is going to start over again, and it's going to be years before it catches up to where it was. The devices themselves really are caught up to that point already. So for a while, this is going to be all the power you're going to need or get in a vertical handheld, I think. Unless something crazy happens with the emulators, you weren't going to need really anything more than this, which is great because we have it now. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this. If you use this, or if you use the 405V, and if you have any opinions on it, do you find them as comfortable as I do? I absolutely love these also. Just before we get going, I got more questions when carrying around the 405V to appointments and things like that than I ever did with any other handheld I've ever owned. People are always asking me about emulation. What is this? You know, a lot of us grew up with the DMG style Game Boys, and to those people, this essentially represents that DMG style Game Boy. Now, we know that maybe it's a different size than that DMG style Game Boy was, but in our minds, we don't really separate that. So people will talk to you and ask you questions about it, and you can tell them how much cooler it is than the DMG style Game Boy. So I think either of these are really good value. The price really isn't that different between the two of them right now. So if you have to choose and you're just coming into this fresh, you know, obviously the 406V is going to be the way to go. And I just can't wait to see what they come out with next, because right now I can't really see anything topping these. I do think that the ANEO Pocket DMG kind of goes into its own category. It doesn't really fit within these. I mean, that's a very, very niche handheld, and if you want the DMG style one, it is $650. You could buy a few of these for the price of that. So I don't think that that really fits within this category, but I know somebody's going to comment on it down below, so that's why I've addressed it a couple of times now. But if you have any questions about it, and again, if you want me to try to test some games for you, put it over on my community page. I do have a post asking for games that people want me to test out on here, and I would have done it today, but I just didn't have time to go through that entire list and see what I did and didn't have in my library. I wanted to make sure I got a video out on this. I am like a month behind on putting this video out, because as I stated at the beginning, I really wasn't going to pull this out. But then once I realized how much different this actually is than the 405, I found that it was probably something I should address. Once I had it in my hands, I knew I needed to address. But that's all I got for today. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, share this video with your friends, because sharing is caring. It also helps grow the channel. Also, if you're bored, there are a couple more videos up here on the screen that YouTube chose for you. I don't know what they are. You probably don't know what they are, but they are based off your algorithm, so obviously you're going to like them. But that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.